Namaste. Welcome to the first episode of Stories Inside Himalayas, and I am your host, Rashmin Lama. Stories Inside Himalayas is an approach to make people aware that Nepal is not only about the Himalayas or its temples, its beauty and simplicity is beyond that. It's all about the cultures, the traditions, environment, natures, floras, faunas, and people, and of course, once in a lifetime experiences that we cater. For the same, we will be having guests from different walks of life who have these stories to tell. It's all about getting to know Nepal in a different dimension. So today, we will be talking about festivals. Specifically, we will be talking about Indra Jatra. And to enlighten us and share stories behind its celebration, we have a veteran social entrepreneur, environmentalist, and current president of Siddhartha Inc., Mr. Anil Chitrakar. So let's welcome him. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for gracing us with your presence. So since हाम्रो whole pod अब सिरिजको एसेन्स भनेको नै इट्स अबाउट गेटिङ टु नो नेपाल नेपालको स्टोरिजहरू थाहा पाउनु सो आज चाहिँ हामी इन्द्र जात्राको बारेमा कुरा गर्छौँ एन्ड नर्मली जेनरली भन्दाखेरि मान्छेहरू इन्द्र जात्रा भनेर बुझिँदाखेरि इट्स अब के यसको रिजन्स किन सेलिब्रेट गर्छ भन्दा चाहिँ लर्ड इन्द्रलाई चाहिँ इट्स अ showing respect अनि उहाँले हामीलाई दिनुभएको रेनफलको लागि which resulted in good harvest त्यति भनेर बुझिन्छ but is it only really up to it or यसमा अरू केही छ एक्स्ट्रा रिजन्स हामीले सेलिब्रेट गर्नुमा हिस्टोरिकल सिग्निफिकेन्स के बियर गर्छ
So let's step back a little bit and try to understand the festival. As a visitor, as somebody like you said who is going to look for an experience. So you mentioned the word Indra. Okay, so Indra, would basically literally mean the kings of the heavens, right? And so for the layperson, say a farmer, somebody who's had to toil the land, for the whole year, the greatest thing, for that group of people is for it to rain. So if you look at it from a Western perspective, so the people who stop the rain or stop the flow of water, so they would be considered the bad guys. Those who allow the water to flow would be celebrated as the good people. And so whether you say compassion, whether you say good things happen in my life, so all that means is that there was good rain, so my crops are growing very well and I feel very comfortable. And so the whole idea is to thank the king of the heavens, Indra, for the fact that you had a good monsoon and the fact that the crops are growing, and because you had a good harvest last year, you have a surplus, right? So you have rice from last year, and so human beings are very practical, they are fun loving and they just love to have a good time, and so this will usually translate into a festival, but then in the name of Indra, who allowed the rains to come in. So just to add on to that, so part of this festival is about Indra, but then as we move ahead, it is a combination of many other aspects of life in the Kathmandu Valley as well.
So इन्द्र जात्राले चाहिँ इफ वी टक अब हिस्ट्री हेर्दाखेरि चाहिँ इन्द्र जात्रालाई यज्ञ पूजा भनेर नि चिनिन्छ यज्ञ पुनिह यसमा चाहिँ के छ रिजन्स
So just on Indra, I think it's very important for us to understand that the first day of the Indra Jatra, so the festival of the Indra Jatra, you will see the hoisting of the pole and then the hoisting of the flag, to celebrate the victory of Indra. So now what we need to just understand is the bad guys would have prevented the rain, the good guys would have passed on the rain, and so basically it's a celebration. So in Hanuman Doka, which is the main palace area of Kathmandu, if you are there on the 13th of September in the afternoon, then you will see the hoisting of that mask, right? Now what we need to understand is that the festival is a combination of 8 days of festivities. So it's not one event, but a series of 8 events. So as you said, part of that is in the 8th century, so around 724 AD, the part of Kathmandu that you will be visiting, the Durbar Square, was built as a new city in 724 AD. And so the Indra Jatra followed by the word that you use, Yenyā Puni. So Puni means full moon, Ye is the old Newari name for Kathmandu. So Nyā as in celebrated. So Yenyā Puni means the full moon, which marks the birthday of the old city of Kathmandu, going back to the 8th century. So, you are celebrating the victory of Indra, which gave us rain, and then you are also celebrating the birthday of the old city of Kathmandu.
So you just said that we celebrate Indra Jatra for 8 days. What does each day consist of?
So, let's take Indra just as an example. So, there is a series of events over the 8 days that will follow the festival for Indra. So, part of that is when you are in the crowd, one thing you will notice is an elephant, right, with a big mask of the Ganesha, going through the crowds, right, and so everybody loves to be entertained, by this elephant, and so we just need to remember that this elephant is the boyhood pet of Indra, and so as the story goes, and so this is the legend of Kathmandu, is that Indra's mother, needed to perform a ritual in the heavens, and so she needed a particular jasmine. And so, in Kathmandu we call it the parijat. This is a very special type of jasmine, we call it the night jasmine, because it blossoms at night, and then early in the morning if you go to the plant, you would see the jasmine is all on the floor. So, Indra comes to Kathmandu to pick some jasmine for his mother. Now, the people of Kathmandu who do not recognize Indra, so they catch him and think that he is a common thief, right. So, when you are traveling through Kathmandu on Indra Jatra, you will see a statue of this childhood Indra being tied to the post. So, this marks the fact that the people of Kathmandu thought he was a common thief and then tied him up. So, now as the story goes, the mother comes to Kathmandu to look for the child, right, and so the little elephant, his pet, arrives in Kathmandu and is going through the crowd looking for Indra, right. So, all these things are blended into a story, but when you are actually taking part in the festival itself, they will look isolated, but they are not isolated. Okay. So, now when the mother arrives to pick up the young Indra, the local people recognize the mother and then also realize that they made a mistake of catching this young Indra, but the local people do not want to give Indra back to the mother without bargaining. Okay. So, this is the fascinating thing. After Indra Jatra, you will see that the monsoon will get replaced by the morning mist. Okay. So, the people of Kathmandu who have agriculture, who are growing the rice, so the rains will actually damage the crop, but if it got replaced by the morning mist, then it keeps the plant and the harvest intact, because the moist air will basically not make the plant brittle, and so the grains do not fall off. So, the story is that the people of Kathmandu basically negotiated the release of Indra for the morning mist, and so that is why in Indra Jatra you will see the rains now being replaced by the morning mist. And then the last day of the festival, you will also see that Indra's mother, as she goes back to heaven, so everybody who passed away in Kathmandu that year, so they basically hold on to her and then make their way to heaven with the mother and child on the way back. So, the point is that it is a 8-day long festival, but each of these sequences will be played out on different days of those 8 days. So, we just need to understand that it is celebration is the fact that there is a surplus in agriculture, but then it is really being very thankful, grateful for the rain, for the harvest, for the mist, and then also the fact that you can send the dead people in your family straight to heaven with Indra's mother.
So, as a part of the whole Indra Jatra, Kumari ko rath pani tanincha. It's also synonym to Kumari Jatra. And yo Kumari ko role चाहिँ के रहेको छ हाम्रो Indra Jatra मा?
So, like I said, it's a combination of many festivals, and so one of the things about the Kathmandu Valley and Nepal in general also is that society regards the safety of young girls below the age of puberty as something very sacred. Okay. So, historically the way we protected our young girls was to basically declare them divine, right. So, till the age of puberty, and so in the colloquial term people say until you bleed, is the term we use, but basically up to puberty every young girl should be regarded as divine. Okay. So, the Kumari that you see is basically a representation of every young girl in the city, and the fact that the people who are ruling this country actually have to get blessed by this young girl is the significance of that ritual is to show that you basically ensure the safety of every girl, and hence you are blessed now to rule for one more year. Okay. So, the Kumari festival is it's a wonderful concept that the girls are all protected in this country, in this city, and you now have the mandate to basically rule for one more year.
And यो कुमारी जात्रा सँगसँगै कुमारीको रथ सँगसँगै भैरव र गणेशको रथ पनि तानिन्छ. And it is also believed that कुमारीको रथ चाहिँ every time पास हुँदाखेरि श्वेत भैरवको मूर्तिको अगाडिबाट पास भएर कुमारीले दर्शन गर्नु भएपछि मात्रै चाहिँ हामीले श्वेत भैरवको मुखबाट चाहिँ त्यो पाइपबाट अल्कोहल प्रोभाइड गर्छौं नि, त्यो स्टार्ट हुन्छ भन्छौं. सो भैरव र कुमारीको रिलेसन चाहिँ कसरी देखाउन खोजिएको छ?
So, I think again like I said these are different aspects of our festival that comes together at the same time. So, go back a little bit again in the history of Kathmandu, and so in ancient times, right, the valley was ruled by a king by the name of Yalambar. So, Ye would be partly from the word Yalambar, and so the story would be that the Mahabharata, the Hindu epic, is happening, and so the Pandavas and the Kauravas are at war, and so the ruler of Nepal also decides to join the battle, right. So, Yalambar arrives in the battlefield, and then Krishna, the hero of the Bhagavad Gita in the Mahabharata, so basically asks this king, which side are you going to fight? And so, being a hill tribesman, an honest man, so the king says, I'm going to fight on the side that is losing. And so, Krishna basically does the math and says, if this guy fights on the losing side, the battle is never going to end. So, it's a very strange story, but basically Krishna beheads this king, and so this king says, can I watch or can I observe the rest of the battle from the sky? Okay. So, now the two words that you use, so Akash and Bhairav. So, Bhairav is in our culture the wrath. So, anger would be a negative because it leads to destruction, but wrath is something that every person should have, where we fight injustice, we fight for human rights, we fight for people, weak people. So, that is wrath. So, the wrathfulness in us is the Bhairav. The word Akash just means sky. Okay. So, here is the Bhairav attribute, watching the Mahabharata from the sky. So, we call it the Akash Bhairav. Okay. So, now during the festival, you will see many of these heads, these floating heads in different parts of the city, but then with a alcohol vat behind the mask, and like I said, the pipe with the alcohol flowing. So, now if you combine everything together, so the rains gave us a good harvest, you still have grain from last year, and so the only way you can increase the shelf life of that grain is either to eat it, to share it with your community, or to ferment it, or to distill it, right. So, what do you see in the 8 days? You see a lot of eating, a lot of feasting, right, and then there is a lot of alcohol present. So, rice beer as well as brandy. But what are you celebrating? So, A, the victory of Indra, which enabled people to have rain. Secondly, you are celebrating the fact that the city made sure that not a single girl was harmed during that year. You are celebrating the birthday of the city. You are also celebrating the fact that the king of this country went and took part in the Mahabharata, and so his return back to the city. So, I think it is a complex way to understand the way Asian culture or Eastern culture works, but the best way to understand is that these are all overlaps in different times, different periods in history, but then we just have to understand that it is all been brought together into an 8-day celebration.
So, अघि procession, chariot procession को कुरा गर्दाखेरि कुमारीको procession and भैरव and गणेशको हुन्छ. So, यो 3 days सम्म मनाइन्छ नि त, but यो route चाहिँ every day different हुन्छ. Route चाहिँ how is it distinguished?
So, very good. So, if you are in London or you are in any modern city, so the city is very distinct in terms of downtown and uptown. Okay. So, historically Kathmandu also has two distinct parts. So, if you say, so the words, so thoi hiti, So, basically means the water spout in the middle of the uptown, and Kohiti means the water spout in the downtown. Okay. So, Kone signifies downtown and Thone signifies uptown. And so, the boundary would be the royal palace, the Malla period royal palace in the middle of the city. So, we call it Lakhey, right. So, now how does it separate? Basically, the working class in the city lived in Kone, and the rich merchants, right. So, they all lived in Thone. And so, in a city, if you think of competition, if you think of venting your class. So, basically like in Bhaktapur you will see there is actually a tug of war to see which side will pull the chariot first. So, historically it has always been determined that the working class will win, and so that is why the chariot gets pulled in the working class areas on the first day, the second day up into the upper class area. Now, the last day which is the fourth time it gets pulled, right. So, just remember this, there are times in history of Nepal when the rulers would have concubines, or they would have queens, and they would have women folk in the palace. And so, there is a story of a particular lady from the Kilagal area, and because the chariot did not get pulled from that neighborhood. So, she went to the king and asked that this one extra day be added, so that the chariot would go through this neighborhood. And so, this is the way things keep on getting added, but the fundamentals would be that day one in the working class area, and then subsequently in the upper class area.
I guess you have witnessed Indra Jatra for around more than 4 or 5 decades. How do you remember Indra Jatra as?
So, this is how so my name Anil and then Chitrakar, right. So, I come from a traditional painting family, the Chitrakars, and so as children basically the greatest joy of the Indra Jatra festival coming was to actually help my grandfather prepare the paint, because he had to make the masks for the different cultural dances. So, whenever we had our turn to make those masks, right. So, as children we got to do the sort of mundane work of grinding the paint. This is the first thing you learned. The second thing is, if you look at the wheels of the chariot, so you will see the eyes painted. So, that is also done by the Chitrakars, right. So, the masks and the so I grew up like standing next to my grandfather, watching him basically perform these rituals. So, it was very important. Now, over the years I also watched Indra Jatra lose its popularity because young people did not participate, they were so we were worried that this festival might sort of die down. And then when we had elected mayors and ward chairmen in the city, so we decided to really do something to revive it. And that year we had the mayor on one side, the deputy mayor on the other side, and we mobilized the entire city to basically revive this festival. But today those worries are actually of no use, because look at all the young people who are participating with drums, with musical instruments. And so, just one round of the chariot in the old part of city can take 6 to 7 hours. And so, with that kind of participation, I think the festival is well. But as people from artisan families who actually have to contribute to the festivities, so those are the memories that we grew up with, was preparing the wheels and also the masks.
So, मेरो साथीहरू पनि यो बाजा बजाउनेतिर एकदमै इन्भल्भ हुन्छ, एन्ड राति राति पनि म त्यहाँ भन्छन् के भन्दै बाजा बजाउँदै गइरहेको हुन्छ. सो यो यङ्स्टर्सहरूमा एउटा इन्थुजियाजम नयाँ आएको छ नि, इज इट बिकज अफ देयर फ्यामिली प्रेसर, अर उनीहरू चाहिँ आफै सेल्फ मोटिभेटेड भयो?
So, pressure would definitely not work. So, I don't think pressure is a thing, but I think in recent years in Nepal we have had a whole big conversation on identity, right. So, identity if it is used properly is a really good word, because my iPhone does not give me a special identity, right, because everybody has one. But the fact that I come from a certain artisan family, I do something special and unique that does not happen anywhere in the world. I think people are realizing that this is unique to me, right. And then I think the role of the social media, which then very quickly allows me to project that image of me in the traditional attire or playing my traditional instrument back to the world almost instantaneously. I am sure that has contributed a lot more. But I think the basic thing is we have to have a surplus, right. People have to have plenty to eat. there must be a culture of giving, right? And then also you have to be fun loving. So if you have these attributes, then I think the festival, makes sense. But also if you are in the crowd, then that's how you will, basically measure the energy in the way. But I think, people taking pride in their history, in their identity, where they came from, I think that is what is reviving, the festivals.
So हाम्रो यो होल जात्रामा चाहिँ आई हेभ सिन पाइल्स अफ फुड्सहरू हुन्छ नि, समय बजी हुन्छ, एउटा लोक्यालिटीमा सबैजनाले कम्बाइन्डली सबै राखेर पाइल्स राखिरहेको हुन्छ. सो त्यो गर्नुको मेन रिजन चाहिँ के हो, अनि पछि त्यो गएर खानाहरूलाई चाहिँ के गरिन्छ?
So I think the whole concept is bringing unity, right? So unity can be defined in many ways. So for example, if you join a certain football club, I think sports really unites people, right? So music, when you go to a concert, I think people get united. So I think food and festivities are a big unifier. And so in the city, which is a very cosmopolitan area, so I am sure throughout the year there are conflicts, there are misunderstandings, there are disputes. And so I think the festival is really a time when everybody says, let's forget and forgive, kind of mood. And so I think everybody contributing to that pile of food is basically two things, right? One is to contribute to the pile, so to create a big pile, but then to share it equally and to have it together. I think it just signifies that this is the time of the year when no matter how difficult a year it was, how many disputes, how many conflicts you had to face, but now let's put that behind us and come together. And so, whether it's food or music, in this case, I think it's food, that brings people together.
So I guess यो न्युवर कम्युनिटीमा चाहिँ न्युवर कम्युनिटीको मान्छेहरूले चाहिँ दे हेभ बिन एज एन इक्जाम्पल. किन भन्दा अरू कम्युनिटीको मान्छेहरूले चाहिँ आफ्नो कल्चरहरूलाई बिर्सेर होइन, अरू मोडर्नाइजेसनतिर चाहिँ इन्क्लाइन भइरहेको छ, बट स्टिल न्युवर कम्युनिटीको पिपल आर देयर प्रिजर्भिङ देयर आइडेन्टिटी, उहाँको हिस्ट्रिजहरूदेखि लिएर कल्चर्सहरूसम्म प्रोटेक्ट गर्दै आइरहेको छन्. अनि बट देयर आर अदर कल्चर्सहरू होइन, कास्टको मान्छेहरूले आफ्नो आइडेन्टिटीलाई नै बिर्सेर आइरहेको छ. सो वाट डु यु हेभ टु से अबाउट दिस?
So, I think, the positive side is that, if you look at the New Year's, if you look at the Losars, if you look at the Tharos, if you look at, the Maghe Sankranti. So, if you go to Janakpur now, with the Mithila heritage, whether you look at, all the. So, I think, yes, there was a time when, people thought this will be lost. But today, I think it's on the upsurge. So, for example, go to Janakpur and see how the entire, Mithila culture is now being revived. Okay. So maybe part of this, has to do with the fact that the country was ruled, by a certain, a category of people, and so they were Shiva worshippers, right? So the Saha kings, who ruled the country, and so at the time, maybe the state, basically wanted to create one identity, for the country, and in the process, you basically marginalized, So the political changes that has happened in Nepal, recently, are a result of the fact that people haven't lost their identity, but they are now reclaiming that space. So yes, I think we have to understand that historically, some of these things were marginalized, but now it is back in a big way. Now how we basically promote it, how we take it forward, again is something that people really need to work on, because we cannot just say that because of the political changes, all these things have happened. Right? So for example, let's take inequality, let's take poverty, let's take the distribution of wealth across the country. So I think there are so many issues, that will basically affect the culture, but we should all realize that Nepal's biggest strength, going forward would be the diversity, of the people and the many cultures. So yes, we might have, gone down a little bit in history, but I think after the political changes, things are now all coming back. So
we are almost at the end of our show, and before concluding it, I just want to ask you one question. What can we expect? First time observer boy, say Indra Jatra, what can we expect?
So there are several things, that you should really enjoy as a visitor. So one is the sounds. So something that, you can write about the festival, but being in that crowd with all the music, with all the drums, so that sound of the city coming alive is something that you really should, enjoy. Now the second thing is that whole idea of the surplus, that wherever you go, you will be offered food, you will be offered drinks, and so saying no, to that would not be a very good idea. So always come to those festivals, ready to eat, ready to drink, right? So this is very important. Now, the third is, I think, for the visitor, is never to be embarrassed to ask. And so Nepal is one of those countries where even if you don't ask, people will volunteer information, right? And so, you can travel around the world where people will never talk to each other. But here people will be more than happy to explain to you, what is happening, where you should go. So I think if you are a slightly, invert, person, then, step out, ask the nearest person, where should I be going, what am I watching, what should I be doing. I think people will be more than, happy to help you have that lifetime experience that you mentioned.
Thank you for watching us. If you want to know more about stories of Nepal, you can visit the website linked below. Do follow us for more contents. Thank you.